Good evening or good morning to you.
Morning, Dr. Friedman. How are you?
I'm okay.
Good morning and a very warm welcome from here at School of Social Sciences, National University of Science and Technology. We are very much thankful to Dr. Bruce Friedman for saving his time, for Dr. Adnan, and we are hoping for some very good piece of discussion, expecting from you lot.
So how many people are you expecting?
Yesterday we had quite a few bunch of presenters, including the viewers. I think the papers are going to be 7 to 8 and 20 plus.
Okay.
People are going to join.
I know that you're going to tell me when I have to stop.
Definitely. But I don't think I can dare to stop you. It's always an intellectual treat to listen. It's always a pleasure listening to you.
Because I know that I have more than half an hour.
Yes, definitely. Yes, you have.
And I did a test run in my class just a while ago, and I had to say, okay, this is a class I want to engage. I want to do interaction, so I had to,
Yeah.
But I wanted to provide the framework.
Yes. Okay.
For the other presentations. So.
Okay.
That'll be very exciting. So looking forward to that.
Sorry, you were saying something, Dr. Adnan?
No, I said that'll be very exciting to Dr. Friedman. It'll be very exciting to have that framework and to build on that.
Because his work on system theory and his books and his deep insight on individuals, families, I mean, it's going to be very exciting for us.
Well, I mean, there's
Community-based participatory action research. Yes.
So I reference it. We talk about, some of the tools, the power mapping and, the step-by-step approach to doing, so it would have been nice if I wanted to see what the new airport looked like in Islamabad.
Perhaps
I would love to, because last time when you visited Pakistan, I was one of the participants in that 1 week workshop. So I am definitely going to be looking forward the next time you visit Pakistan. Definitely. Because last time when you visited NUST, I was a participant in that course, and it was a very learning experience. It was very learning. The 7-day workshop was very learning.
Yeah, well, I was hoping you were going to invite me to come back.
Definitely. Why not? I'll talk to Dr. Salma. Then why not? If we invite you for the sharing of some insight from this book as well.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe we'll even start a social work program there.
Yes, that can be exciting as well. Recently, we started a law program. Recently, we started another MS in government and public policy. So why not another program in social work as well? Yes. How is life so far with this COVID and Omicron things on your side? I hope everything is going safe and healthy.
Yeah, things are going okay. I mean, in fact, I have an app where I can put in, where you can put in the code from the VAT number from the vaccine. It'll tell you how many deaths there were.
But it was a change which we never I can't say which we never foresaw, but which we were never trained to, which we were never like ready to as social scientists. It's a change for our ages, which I think we are not still ready yet. Still, we are in the learning process. And still, we are in the accepting process that mask is the new reality of life. Social distancing is the new reality of life. So it's kind of a new thing.
Yeah, it is. And so how's the pandemic in Pakistan?
It's a kind of a mixed reaction. Initially, people were kind of hesitating for going for vaccination, a kind of mixed response from the people. Normally, people were very scared. Gradually, it's a very good response for people getting vaccinated. And as it has become mandatory for getting vaccinated, and so many excesses towards public places become restricted if you don't show your vaccination certificate. So things are quite in a stable position now, quite stable. And now gradually people have realized that mask is a new reality. So life without mask is going to be dangerous for their self and for the people around them. So yes, finally surrender to masks, surrender to social distancing, the new reality of life.
Well, I know, I mean, people are still wearing masks on campus. So, we're just trying to figure out what's going on.
Yes.
Should I put a mask on?
It's I wish it was that. If it was virtual.
Okay.
You see people wearing masks driving alone in the car, and you always wonder.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's like, so as a sort of a promotional item, we had masks that said University of Texas, El Paso, UTEP social work on them, so that to show that we were socially responsible.
Yes.
Of course.
And we are displaying a socially responsible and a sensitive behavior towards other fellow human beings. Dr. Bruce, another 5 minutes, and then you can share your screen and we can start your presentation.
Okay. And somebody's going to introduce me?
Yes, definitely. I'll take those honors. Why not? I will do it. It's such a great moment for me. And I'm so super excited that introducing one of my mentors in qualitative research, introducing a person whom I always like open the book. I go to Google, and whenever I'm stuck in community-based qualitative research, I always go back to your books. Whenever human interactions confuse me, I always go open something from your work, and it's done. So I mean, you can see how excited I am when I'm having this opportunity of my lifetime introducing you.
Well, I'm doing a class. I'm doing a class this summer on mixed methods research.
Okay.
You want to come?
Is it online?
We hadn't thought about it that way, but I can check and see.
Yes, please. If it is online, I would love to. I would love to join. If it is online, I would love to be.
But I'm thinking what time. I think we're offering it in the afternoon, like 4 in the afternoon, which would be 4 in the morning in Pakistan.
I can manage it because I'm an early bird. I always wake up early, so mornings are not an issue for me. I mean, late nights a little slow I become, but I'm an early bird. I'm the happiest person when I wake up early.
I know.
I mean, even on Sundays.
I'm usually up early too, but then I'm saying, oh, this is going to be interesting. It's 10 o'clock at night for me.
For me, 9 o'clock in the night is like end of the day, and for me, early mornings are the best time to study, to prepare lectures, to do my own work, to do my own book reading. I enjoy early mornings.
Yeah.
Because that's the best time, one-on-one time. You spend time, you spend quality time with your own self. So early mornings are the best time.
Yep.
Another 1 minute, and then I'll start introducing you, and we'll be going live.
No, it's too quiet.
Yes. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good morning, everyone. All the presenters are Honorable Dr. Bruce Friedman, Dr. Adnan Khan. Thank you very much for joining us today. Dr. Bruce's name needs no introduction. He is a experienced person in the field of social work in the areas of social service management, program development. He holds a vast experience in working with individuals, families, and groups. He holds a vast experience in terms of marriage counseling, family counseling, homelessness, in terms of substance abuse treatment, and spirituality. He is the author of 10 books, if I'm right, Dr. Bruce. I hope it's not more than 10.
I lost count.
Yes, he is the author of 10 books, including so many chapters in different books. Dr. Friedman has a very, very keen eye in looking at issues of health inequalities and how the role of community can play an important part in addressing those inequalities. I warmly welcome Dr. Friedman for saving some time from his very busy schedule and gracing this occasion. It's always an intellectual feast to be your listener, sir. Please share your screen.
Okay. All this technology issues, it's like.
Thank you.
Okay. So I want to welcome everybody. It's 10 o'clock at night here, and I know it's 10 o'clock in the morning in Pakistan. And I was very honored to be invited to present at this international conference. The theme I thought was interesting: social integration, community well-being. And I started thinking to myself, what is it that I wanted to really address when we begin to talk about social well-being and community well-being and social integration? So,
Dr. Friedman, can sorry to interrupt, but can I ask you to reverse your screens? You're showing us the support screen. Can you flip it so that we can see the main screen? It's in the display settings at the top.
So wait a minute. What you're seeing is, okay.
The black screen with 2 slides on it. Now we're seeing your screen, main screen. So if you go into that display thing and go at the very top, there are 3 options. The one in the middle called display settings. You can flip the screens.
So which screen do you see now?
I'm seeing what's probably your desktop. Like it's not in the display mode. It's not in the slide mode.
So I
But
need
when
to
you
stop.
go to the slide mode,
Go to the slide mode. We should have done this before I started, right?
I guess.
Oh, well. So if I go to share screen, that's not what you want.
You can share, so you have to start with the share screen.
Okay. And then I go to screen 1, which is where I want to be. Okay.
So right now you're not in the slide. Well, you can work out of this. That's fine too.
Okay. And then I went into presentation mode.
Exactly.
Do you see it says session objectives?
I do see this. This is fine. I think this will work.
Yes, this is fine. I think this is fine.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Please, sir.
So, I mean, if you have questions, then please feel free to interrupt. But
Sure.
so what I was planning on doing tonight or this morning for you is really talk about the theoretical foundation, how I look at social integration and community well-being. What does it mean? Really begin to talk about health disparities and put it within a framework, a systems framework. I kind of look at myself somewhat as a systems theorist. So I look at systems theory. And then what I wanted to do is how do we take this from a theoretical perspective and really put it in an action research modality so that we can really begin to get into some sort of a change piece. Now, there are a number of steps that I would like to try to address in a limited amount of time, which is how do we define community, what is community, engage community, then look at some asset mapping, what is power mapping, and then to really begin to talk about tools that help with change. So let's start with social integration and community well-being. And in thinking about that, and this is the part I would want to eliminate a little bit, but is everybody familiar with these Sustainable Development Goals that were developed by the World Health Organization?
Yes, for me.
Okay. So, I mean, I don't need to go through what the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, that's a foundation of it, or should I click on the link that goes into the SDGs? Okay. Basically, if I need to go back, I will, but to save time, some of the Sustainable Development Goals really get into the whole aspect of ending poverty and looking at how do we look at equity, gender equality, and improving health and reducing, and there are 17. The thing that I thought, I mean, it has to deal with environmental climate change. The thing that I thought was really important about the SDGs is that the emphasis is really on a larger community perspective. It's looking at societal issues that need to happen. Now, contrary, the Center for Disease Control has what they call the social determinants of health, SDOHs. And their emphasis is really looking at personal, social, and economic factors that affect health. So what I see as the major difference between the World Health Organization and the Center for Disease Control in the United States is that the CDC is really looking at individual types of factors and how global outcomes really address individual health needs. If I need to, I can get into more detail on that, but I'm also very conscious of time. So the way I like to look at that is if we look at health disparities, there are a number of factors that interact with health disparities, looking at aspects of culture, looking at psychosocial factors, health behaviors, looking at aspects of social context and bicultural issues, looking at morbidity, mortality rates, looking at stressors, that relate to unfair treatment, employment factors. I mean, all of these factors relate both to the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, which is more of a macro perspective, or the CDC's approach to health disparities, which is more individualized. And it's important to take a look at the factors of demographics, of race, socioeconomic status, education. Information technology relates to health disparities. We have biological factors. One of the things I like to talk about is, when you go for the first time for a doctor's appointment, they do a family history. Well, why? Part of it is they want to understand whether or not there's genetic factors that the individual may be predisposed to, or whether or not there are environmental factors, so that we take into consideration both the physical as well as the biological factors of the individual. All of this is really part of a larger systems framework. Systems theory was really developed by von Bertalanffy, who was a biologist. And he looked at, here you have a system, and then you have things that go into that system, and then you have outputs or things that come out of that system. And what happens inside with those inputs is called throughputs. But there are certain goals that you're trying to achieve. Now, Uri Bronfenbrenner was a psychologist. And interestingly, he grew up in upstate New York, and his father had a family farm, and he was looking at all the different animals that would come to the pond that was on the farm. And he began to realize that there are ecological factors that relate to what's happening. And so you have Carol Germain and Alex Gitterman, who sort of put these two factors together, and they started talking about an ecological systems framework. And the way I like to look at it is that this is a basic systems model where you have the inputs, and as a worker, you are an input into that system. That system has a number of, has throughputs with all those inputs coming in. And what you're looking at, what you're seeing is an output. That's the data that you're seeing that the system is generating. Now, there are goals that you hope to achieve. And so that the question that comes up is, are the outputs related to the outcomes, which are the goals? And if not, then you have to do a feedback loop to determine what are the inputs you need to change or add to that system in order to make the outputs equal or more equal to the outcomes or the goals. And this is all part of a larger social environment. And the other piece is that a system is not operating by itself. There are other systems that interact with that system. When you begin to add Uri Bronfenbrenner's work to it, you begin to see that you have each of these different units of analysis that could be an individual, could be a family, could be a group, could be a community, could be a society, but there are also those internal factors. So that we were talking, I mentioned earlier about the about, the genetic factors that are affecting that particular individual system. Now, as a worker, you have to identify where would it be best to make an intervention. Would that intervention be the individual, him or herself? Would the intervention be a family to look at the effect of the family that it has on the individual? Would the intervention be a group? Would it be a community? So that you can have different levels of interventions. I mean, if you have a heart problem, you go to a cardiologist, and the cardiologist is looking at the internal systems of the heart and how the heart is working. So that, there are different ways of having interventions at all various different levels. And as a worker, you have to make that determination of where is the best place to have that intervention in order to achieve an outcome that will help with wellness. So that there are 9 basic assumptions when you begin to look at systems theory. First of all, there is an underlying general order in the world. So that, that's why we have theories, because there's a cause and effect. And that social ordering is a constant and dynamic process, so that we're constantly dealing with change. And that all human behavior is purposive, so that we may not know why we do the things that we do, but there's a reason why we do it. All forms of social organization display self-maintaining and developmental characteristics, so that basically an organism is very much interested in maintaining life. Sure, we can talk about suicidology and some of those factors, but the reality is most people are not interested in dying. They really want to look at what they need to do in order to live. And social organizations that really work with that, that all of those intricate parts are great, are greater than the sum of those parts. So for example, you have NUST, which is a social organization, and then you have a variety of different colleges within NUST, and each of those is focusing on, they're part of it, but the whole entire social organization is greater than the sum of each of those individual parts. Going back before about wanting life, well-being is a natural state. And all humans and human social organizations are really looking at building strengths. And this is where Dennis Salibi came in, and he started talking about the strengths perspective. We can look at solution-focused therapy, which is everybody knows the outcome that they're looking to achieve, but they may not know how to get there. And so therefore you have the worker that's going to ask the miracle question and say, given, what would you really like to see happen if a miracle occurred while you were sleeping and you woke up and things were different? How would you know that they were different? What are the steps that would tell you that? And all human beings are social animals, so that it's very important, it's fundamental to really look at the relationships that exist between all these various different social units. And that the helping process, and I'm assuming, and I shouldn't assume anything, but I am presuming that most of the people, I like to get a sense of who's participating or who's here. But in looking at the other presentations that are going to follow, most of them are about helping. And so that the helping process is seen as, in professional helping, as a formulation of natural social processes. And it's important to understand what those processes are. So that's why we're looking at this sense of well-being. Some basic concepts is that human beings learn to adapt. The process of learning how to cope with external demands by getting various different resources from the environment. That we're looking at self-preservation to maintain and sustain ourselves. We look at coping. We learn how to cope with mechanisms of various different types of stress. We transform ourselves, and that we have this ability of changing our properties to transform to the various different dynamics that we're dealing with. And that we're always dealing with a constant flow and change. And that there's an aspect of synergy, that transactions within and between human systems lead to a sense of fulfillment. And if anybody has any questions, please stop me. So in looking at it, the question that we have to really look at is, how do we use community to build well-being? So that I'm going to cover the 9 basic steps of community-based participatory research. First of all, well-being in healthy communities or access, they are pretty much one and the same. So societies, and I thought that this was a very interesting concept, societies can produce as much poverty as they do wealth. That part of that well-being, part of that poverty or wealth, has to do with political apathy that follows. And that civic participation in societal corrections really contribute to that. So that part of the issue that we're going to get into a little bit later is really looking at, if we're looking at change, we really need to look at how we use that community in order to help with building healthy communities or access to them. Here are the 9 steps in community-based participatory research. First of all, it's important to define the community. Communities vary, and it's important to really look at, it's not just geography, and we'll get into that in a second, but it's what is the community that we really want to look at, to address. And then the next piece is, how do we engage that community? You know, it's one thing to define it, but if we're really going to be participatory, then we need to engage the community and listen to what they perceive their problems are. And then we need to really look at, what are the research issues or questions? From a researcher, you design the hypothesis, you begin to identify what roles people will play, and then you begin to collect the data. You go through a process of analyzing and interpreting it, and then you share that information with the community, and so that they can have some input. How accurate were you in that whole development of the data and analyzing and interpreting it? And then the piece that becomes important is that we develop some sort of action. So we apply action so that they can feel, I mean, how many times have I heard when I come into a new community and say, oh yeah, we've participated in a research study, but we never heard the results of it. So how do we know how to change or how to move forward? And so the piece that becomes important in community-based participatory research is that you're involving the community along the way as you go. And that's a very important piece, because that provides credibility to the work that you're doing. Part of that relates to 2 techniques I'm going to talk about: community mapping and how to do a power analysis. So when we talk about defining the community, it's like, who can make this happen? So okay, if this was a workshop, I'd say turn to your neighbor and tell me how you define community, but I'm keeping track as we have people following me. So what defines a community? Is it just the geography? Or are there other factors like culture, language? Do the public institutions and agencies create community? Are there shared stories, a history, a tradition, so that everybody that's at this conference, is this conference a community? And if it is it a temporal community, or are you hoping that there may be relationships that emerge from this community that you will have beyond the conference, that you'll be able to engage? So you look at you have shared stories, and being a participant at the conference is a shared story. It's a history that you will have with the other individuals at this conference. So there is a community just within this conference. And then you have different aspects of community groups and informal networks that all become part of this whole aspect of defining community. And it's important for us to, when we define community, to incorporate all these different elements in it to determine who is that community. And this is a picture of Kern County where I used to be, which you see has the oil wells and the farmland. So it was quite interesting. Now, once you define that community, if you're looking for change, it's important you can create this little power map to define who are the power brokers within the community. And the way you do that is you have a scale of 1 to 10, where you're looking at the amount of power that individuals may have. But then you also want to look at what position or perspective do they have on the agenda? Do they have the ability to be diehard supporters of the intervention or the change? Or are they going to be individuals who are diehard against it? And if we go back, part of the issue is you may want to look at your politicians. But the question is, where do your politicians lie as far as the amount of power that they have? So that the politician, they may have the formal power, but and that might really be a 6 or an 8 on this power scale. But there are other people that influence these power brokers, the politicians. And those might be the individuals that you really want to reach if you want to influence some type of a change process. So some of the tools that I like to use in order to help with change, and one of my favorites is Kurt Lewin's force field analysis. But then there's also a SWOT analysis, which really came out of business, but it's applying those tools to human services. And then we take the data from either a force field analysis or SWOT analysis, and we can put it into a logic model to help with the creation of a change process. So the way that a force field analysis works, it's sort of a group think technique, because what you're doing is on the top, you're identifying all the stakeholders. First of all, in the middle, you identify a problem. What is the problem that we want to address? Once we identify the problem, then we can identify who cares, who are the stakeholders, and identify all the individuals that may be involved or engaged that we really feel are stakeholders to this particular issue. We lay them out on, we write it out above. And then what we try to do is, what are the driving forces that lead to us to have a change? And what are the restraining forces that are preventing us from creating this change? Once we have this all laid out on a piece of paper, flip chart, whatever you want, we can then begin to analyze that and identify what are realistic tasks or solutions that we need to follow in order to address or to achieve that change. Another tool that I like is a SWOT analysis. SWOT was developed for business community, and it's really looking for a goodness of fit between some of the external factors, which are the opportunities and threat, and that's what OT is in SWOT, or the internal characteristics, such as the strengths and weaknesses of the organization. And so therefore, what you do is you do an analysis using a rigorous planning process that really looks at, here are the strengths and the weaknesses of our organization, but here are the opportunities and threats that the organization is currently facing. And then you analyze all that data to come up with a level of looking at, here are the political, economic, social, technological, and competitive environmental factors that relate to this particular organization. And then, how do we begin to look at what are those opportunities and threats? And then we look at what are our resources that exist within the organization. What are our strengths? Most human service organizations, the strengths are the individuals, the employees themselves. But you may have certain levels of expertise that within your organization or there may be gaps in certain levels of expertise that may be a weakness of the organization. And so then by doing an in-depth analysis of these tools, you can come up with a strategic initiative of how you want to move forward in order to help address these different factors. Which then leads to taking all of the data and creating a logic model, which will then begin to depict the flow of the materials and processes. So if you go back, remember Von Bertalanffy's systems theory? Well, what a logic model does is it identifies the inputs. What are each of those inputs going to do? And then looking at the outputs, or what are the visible things that the inputs are going to hopefully create. And then you identify, do these address short-term, intermediate outcomes, intermediate goals, or long-term goals? So it's a way of organizing your data to help create a plan, an action plan that you can use, and looking at the short-term and the long-term outcomes as an evaluation tool to see what you need to do in order to create some level of change. So in the brief half hour or so, what I tried to do was define, and I could spend a lot more time. I just presented this content in a 3-hour class. And so, there's a lot more that could be done. But I just presented an overview to define, we define what theoretical foundations relate to social integration and community well-being. Talked about health disparities and related them back to both the CDC and the World Health Organization's framework of sustainable development goals and social determinants of health. But I put it within a framework, a systems framework, so we can begin to look at how we want to create a change process and plan some change, and then identify some tools that help relate to that change. So I want to thank you and ask if there are any questions, and I'll be open for discussion or communication. I went through that pretty quickly because I know I had a half hour. And I have nobody wants to say anything. Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bruce, for this very, very, very interesting, very enlightening, and quite a new set of knowledge for me, shared for me, and obviously, and definitely for all of our participants as well. First of all, I would like to ask Dr. Adnan if he has any question, because definitely I have a question. Dr. Adnan, if you have any question.
You're muted.
Am I?
No, not you. Dr. Adnan is muted.
Oh, sorry, I'm muted. No, I think, please go ahead. I think this has been very useful, at least for me. It helps contextualize what we'll be hearing and then how to process that. So please go ahead.
Any of the participants, if you have any questions from Dr. Bruce? Sir, I have a little question. With reference to the ecological model that you shared in the beginning of your slide, with reference to the current COVID and Omicron situation, where do you see, as a seasoned social worker and with such a deep insight into human relations and human interactions, where do you see we as social workers need to intervene more for the COVID survivors in the post-COVID scenario? I mean, where do we need to work in terms of their rehabilitation once they are COVID survivors? You know, there's so many continuing health issues, the prolonged COVID, the chronic COVID symptoms, COVID issues. Do we need to prioritize family in terms of power mapping, or do we need to work on community and prioritize them in terms of power mapping once we are trying to rehab the COVID survivors?
But it's a very complicated issue, because I know that, that in the United States, we have Anthony Fauci, who has been, consulting with the government in order to talk about the whole issue of vaccines and looking at mandating and what are some of the protections, whether we wear masks or don't wear masks, looking at a lot of those different factors. And on the other hand, are those factors affecting our individual liberties? Are they taking away our individual liberties? And so that we have this conflict that we're dealing with. And then there's always the issues of, as you were saying, family and community. So initially when the pandemic hit, there was a decision to shut everything down, so that you saw that it was an effect of, on community, we will lock down the community, and hopefully that will help slow down the spread of the pandemic of COVID. Well, that didn't seem to work, and everybody was complaining that, it affected our economic system. So that what we're still trying to figure out is what is the best way. And hopefully, we're at a level of endemic where we're learning how to live with COVID. So as I look at, various different countries like, Great Britain and a lot of the Scandinavian countries, they have ended their mask mandate because they've realized that, okay, we're getting pretty much there. I think that there is a whole discussion of herd immunity and whether or not there is enough individuals who have been able to develop their individual immunities to COVID, that we will be able to continue to move on and survive. And so that, there's still a lot of data that we don't know, is it beneficial? Are the pharmaceutical companies, pushing the more expensive medications like remdesivir, or are the less expensive medications like ivermectin just as effective in addressing the pandemic? And these are things that we're struggling with right now, because you have the medical community on both sides, which will say that, well, remdesivir is really attacking people's organs and killing people, but it's the preferred medication that's used in the hospitals in the United States. Whereas ivermectin, which maybe only costs about 25 cents a dose, is one that's shunned upon. And so who's driving these decisions? Are those decisions being driven by economic factors, or are they being driven by science? And those are the things that really begin to be important, is how do we make those decisions? And the big issue that's happening here is you have the pro-vaxxers like Anthony Fauci, and then you have Robert Kennedy Jr., who is heading up an anti-vax campaign and saying that, there are some problems with the decisions to vaccinate everybody because it's cutting out the whole issue of and Dr. Malone, who's really looking at, maybe we shouldn't be vaccinating children, because COVID is really an adult problem. And we need to allow children to really develop their own, immunities within themselves. But by vaccinating the children, then what we're doing is we're not allowing them to develop their own, their own immunities. So, these are the debates that are going on, and who's making those decisions? And is it really a government decision, or should it really be a medical decision? So that's a long answer, and I don't know if I really answered the question specifically.
You have in a very detailed way, you have answered my question, and all of the parts of my question have been excellently answered. Thank you very much, sir, for gracing our occasion, and thank you very much for this very enlightening, very informative, and full of knowledge presentation. And thank you very much for sharing these views regarding power mapping, regarding force field analysis, and in terms of identifying who is or who can potentially play key role in terms of well-being. Thank you very much, sir.
Well, you're welcome. And if anybody else has any questions or comments, I was looking and I said, I was thinking, what should I talk about? And I wanted to lay a framework that would really lead into the following presentations that are looking at more individual, issues. But how do we really organize that within a well-being and create a plan for change to improve the well-being of each of those different areas? So I hope I was able to do that.
Yes, you were. Yes, definitely you were. Thank you very much, Dr. Bruce. Thank you very much. Here, Now we'll start with our first presentation. It is about a study conducted in Congo. The presenter is Nazia Mustafa, and it is about enhancement of psychological functioning through support for students exposed to trauma among school children. This is a pilot randomized control trial from Democratic Republic of Congo. Ma'am Nazia Mustafa. Is Nazia Mustafa there? I think Nazia Mustafa has got some connectivity issues. In the meanwhile, do we have our next presenter online? Azhar Hamid Kamar sir?
Yes, I am here.
Ji, please. Sir, I know it's a little early from the scheduled time, but as Ma'am Nazia is having some connectivity issues, would you be kind enough to share your presentation on the title of Problematizing Definition of Social Resilience, a scoping review of popular definitions? Please, sir, you have 15 minutes. And
yeah, sure,
please,
I do.
Over to you, sir.
Yeah, I do. Just let me share my screen first.
Ji, please.
So I think it is visible to everyone.
Yes, it is. It is.
Okay, thank you very much for this part of inviting me to participate in this conference. Topic of my presentation is problematizing definition of social resilience, and it is a kind of scooping review of popular definitions. My name is Azhar Hamid, and I am a postdoc researcher at School of Social Work, Lund University, Sweden, and I am also an assistant professor at Department of Behavioral Sciences, NUST. I will begin with a kind of comprehensive definition of social resilience that actually I derived from different definitions. And it says that social resilience is a capacity or ability to deal with stress and to take opportunities that might rise to maintain and increase its well-being. However, here I am taking a shift from the common discourse on resilience that actually divides people between resilient and non-resilient people. So that's why I just remember a poster that was used in around 2003 in Orlin, I think. And it says that don't call me resilient at all, because when you call me resilient, you practice more adversity for me. So something like that. So then I am taking a shift from this common discourse on resilience to a little bit new concept or a relatively new concept of social resilience. And why I am saying it's new, you will soon come to know about it. In this presentation, I am connecting social resilience and the role of the multifaceted environment with an intersectional perspective. And on the other side, I am using constructionist perspective, where I see social resilience as grounded into our social and cultural realities and our contextual fiber. So there are two important objectives of this presentation. First, to discover characteristics of social resilience by reviewing definitions of social resilience. And second, to describe those key characteristics of social resilience that these definitions conceptualize. In this grouping review, I used academic literature, searching the electronic databases, Scopus and Web of Science, and the articles, only the journal articles. I excluded all the book chapters and conference papers, so it was only the journal articles published since 2000. And two main criteria was to include the articles who are written theoretically or with empirical data, but they must contain the word social resilience in their titles. It is my assumption that if they include social resilience in their titles, it means these articles are exclusively focused on social resilience. So I only included those articles which include the word social resilience in their titles. And then I screened further to see if the definition exists in those articles, either it is employed or it is operationalized. But these articles, if they are exclusively talking about social resilience, and that is relatively new concept emerging in around 2000 or 2003, then they should have a kind of definition in those articles. So these were two major criteria of screening the literature. Overall, I found 898 articles, and among those 898 articles, only 313 articles include the social resilience word in their titles. And after screening and removing duplications, I could found only 57 articles which have the definition of social resilience. However, if you see on this slide, I could only extract 16 definitions, and they were repeatedly used. Interestingly, the most used definition was Edgar's definition, which he gave in 2000, 2002. It is more related to ecology, and but anyhow, this was popular definition, and it was used to as a kind of a guide for many of the researchers, because all of the other researchers, they actually refer to Edgar's definition while giving their own definition. Now, some of the results of this, the content of the definitions. Edgar actually tries to conceptualize social resilience through capacity of someone to withstand disaster situations. So for him, stressors cause change and they pressurize and threaten our social structure and livelihood and resources. And when we face those stressors and stand up, then actually we practice social resilience. However, in all these definitions, the words that were used to describe disaster or challenge or change, they come up like challenges, changes, crises, stresses, hazards, disasters, threats, and the word that were used to mention the characteristics of these adversities, they will mostly come with conflicts, disruption, uncertainty, unpredictability, and surprises. So you see that the content of the words, it itself referred to that most of the publication would fall under the disaster studies or disaster-related studies. Then I will come to an important point, that is intersectionality. Social resilience that I see after going through all these definitions and the articles, the social resilience it is a kind of study of sustainability in the context of social well-being, but at the same time, it leads to intersectionality of environmental factors. Because this notion of adversity, it is very much relatable to different environmental factors that intersect each other. However, this notion of intersectionality was rarely used in the studies of social resilience. And mostly the social resilience studies are discipline specific. And I do not see any of these studies leading towards interdisciplinary structures except a couple of. So when we see this intersectionality of multiple environmental factors, it means that we should study social resilience beyond the traditional definition of resilience, assessing individual traits and psychological fitness to define resilient and non-resilient people. Now, if you see that these resources that earlier I called the change and challenges in the environmental factors, resources will also come from those environmental factors. For example, the social resources through social network, and how do we access those resources, our political visibility and empowerment, access to financial support and resources, community support, cultural presentation and belongingness, psychological strength, bonding and well-being. All these things actually intersect to promote well-being. I am studying social resilience in the context of migration, and I am working on the immigrants' lived experiences in the host country. So I can see that all these environmental factors are much more meaningful than they are used in other studies which are not related to the immigrants' lives in the host countries. Now, this is a kind of conclusive definition, and it is also a recommendation to study social resilience, that the few of the studies that use social resilience definitions and they clearly elaborate something, they mention social resilience as a capacity, but this is not something static or fall under the measurable constructs, but it is an agency, a reflexive agency, and an interactive response to different situations in which we need coping and adaptation and transformation. So social resilience as a capacity is a reflexive agency of human beings in which they cope with the diversities, that is called reactive agency. And when throughout the process, gradually they come out of the adversity or they have some standing on it, they try to build competence through interactions and transformation. But this competence is also shaped by and within the context, and then we call it as a proactive agency. Conclusively, in this short presentation, it is important to understand social resilience, but then the term of social should not be empty. It should really should be loud well in the understanding of social resilience, and it should include the process-oriented construction where resilience is a capability that is exercised, that is learned, that is practiced, and with reference to the changing situations environmentally. And on the other hand, social resilience as an agency it is a dynamic social process, and it is not static or fixed or objectively measurable capacity. So we should think it in the same way. Oh, well, in this short presentation, I could only present this, but if you have your thoughts and comments, you can share with me on email, and you can also share here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Please stop sharing your slide. Yeah. Thank you very much, Azhar Saab, for this very enlightening presentation. I mean, any questions from the participants? Any questions from the chair, Dr. Adnan?
No, thank you. I think we'll discuss quite towards the end.
Azhar Saab, I have a very little question. As you have, I can see you have spent so much time and energy in doing this research of exploring the actual definition of social resilience. Would you like to share, on the basis of all that reading, all that research, all that exploring of the data that you have done so far, what is your own take on, or what is your own personal definition based on all this data that you have gone through? What is your own definition of social resilience?
Yes, because I am working on social resilience in the context of migration, and I am exploring immigrant lived experiences in Sweden. So I definitely use or operationalize the definition of social resilience. And I do not see it as a kind of capacity or ability, but I take it as a process, as an experience. So for me, social resilience is more like a verb. So you have to act it. So then if you take social resilience as an experience, it will not be used to just kind of giving a heroic notion of resilience, of being resilient or being non-resilient. Rather, it will explain how human beings gives meaning to their exercises that they use in certain contexts, and how at the intersection of several environmental factors, they shape their lives throughout living in the host country or in the countries where they are facing disasters. So in my definition, social resilience is an experience to go through all these transitory experiences and then transforming into a new normal state. So it is more than bounce ahead. It is not a bounce back, but it is a bounce ahead.
Thank you very much, sir. This is actually, we need in these challenging times, in these pandemic situations, that we should not take it as an experience. We should take it as a capacity that we need to be investing in as individuals, as families, and as communities on daily basis, on hourly basis, so that we can swim through these challenging times easily, swiftly, and in the least by creating least harm to humanity. Thank you very much, Azhar Saab, for this
Yes, thank you. But
piece of research.
Thank you. But I actually said that social resilience should be studied as an experience rather than an capacity. Yeah.
Thank you for correcting. Thank you very much. Our next presenter, as we are living in an age where personal as well as structural violence is on the rise, in these times, our next presenter, Anila Aziz, from National Institute of Psychology, Quaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad, is going to present her research on gender-based discrimination and well-being of girls with child marriages. Anila Aziz, please share your screen.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Can you see my slides?
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay, so today I'm going to present gender-based discrimination and well-being of girls with child marriages. And I'm a PhD scholar in National Institute of Psychology, and I have this paper with Professor Dr. Anila Khan, who is currently a Vice Chancellor of Women University. So coming to the introduction and background of the study about child marriages, as you all may be familiar with the term child marriages. The marriages that happen under the 18 years of age, or mostly with girls, are known as child marriages. And it's a pervasive problem in South Asia, and it increasingly recognized as a violation of human rights. And as you all may know that it has some adverse health and social outcomes in the life of girl. So these mostly studies are conducted in Africa and India, and Pakistan is also highlighted as the one of these countries where child marriages are very common. So as you can see, there are some effects on the life of girl who are under girl child marriages. They have newborn malnutrition problems, low birth weight, poverty, lack of education among girls, and highest mortality rate among young mothers and neonate. So in this study, we have considered the attitude towards girl child marriages. Is the attitude of general public toward girl child marriages. So we define this term as a tendency to respond positively or negatively towards girls being married before the age of 18. So these are some social problems that we already have discussed in the region of South Asia. And the women or the girls who married under 18 suffer from many developmental issues related to their physical well-being or their mental well-being. And women are generally considered as a extra burden for establishing their competence as compared to male competence. So we have taken this attitude under the scenario of social dominance orientation. So as you all may be familiar that there is a social hierarchy on the basis of gender that always exists in the society, where discrimination against subordinate group, in this case women, are most common. So as I have already described that I have taken this study under that theoretical perspective of social dominance orientation theory, where child marriages are happening in Pakistan under the view of tradition, culture, and customary practices. These practices are mazuma and vani, sawara, etc. These are common terms for those cultural practices under which child marriages are happening in South Asia. So in this perspective, social dominance theory relate with it as a gender biasness or dominance of one gender group in the society that detaches the subordinate gender group from their basic living rights. So there was a qualitative analysis done in the literature, and they have described that there are some unwanted traditional practices associated with social norms among people living in rural areas of Bangladesh. Okay, the rationale of the present study was the social dominance orientation might be related with attitude towards girl child marriages, where social dominance orientation has two dimensions. That the first one is dominance dimension, while the second one is egalitarianism. So the dominance dimension is positively associated, as assumed in the present study, with attitude towards girl child marriages, while the other dimension, that is egalitarianism, is negatively associated with attitude towards culture. So these were the assumptions of the present study. So hypotheses were built up on this rationale that social dominance orientation, dominance dimension, is positively correlated with attitude towards girl child marriages, and the student sample was taken as a general public. And the second hypothesis was egalitarianism dimension is negatively correlated with attitude towards girl child marriages. And the third hypothesis were that male adolescents have more positive attitude towards girl child marriages as compared to female. So we moved on to the instruments that we are going to use for measurement of these attitudes. So these two instruments were used. That one is social dominance orientation scale. It has 16 items, and it was the translated version of this scale was used. And the other one is attitude towards girl child marriages scale, that has 12 items, and it was translated in the present study. Sample of 250 male and female adolescents were taken from different universities, public and private universities, and the convenient sampling technique was used. Ethical considerations like informed consent, willingness of the participant, and confidentiality of the provided information was carefully taken. So data was filled into SPSS version 21 for analysis, and the results indicated the demographic characteristics of the sample were that male and female undergraduate to postgraduate educational level, age range of 18 to 34 were observed in the data, and these were the mostly participants living in urban region of the country. So the correlation analysis was done, and social dominance orientation was found to be significantly and positively associated with attitude towards girl-child marriages, and the dominance dimension was positively and significantly associated with attitude towards girl-child marriages, while the egalitarianism had no significance for attitude towards girl-child marriages. While the third hypothesis was based on mean differences of gender, that indicated that male participants have more positive attitude towards girl-child marriages as compared to females. So the conclusion is social dominance orientation about sexuality and discrimination has a high chance of directly or indirectly affecting the acceptance towards girl-child marriages, because we follow the tradition, we follow the norms. So these attitudes are commonly involved or indulged into the adolescents population, and the long-term existence of these gendered norms in any society has prompted the wrong image of females, and people are mentally unprepared to accept the concept of women's education and professionalism. This view of a female gender has thrown women in the jeopardy of status discrimination and stereotypical misconception. These myths need to be reconceptualized and provide evidence and advantages of women education and professionalism instead of forcing them into child marriages. So the implications of the present study are: the present study can be helpful in the awareness and educational seminars for attitude change campaigns related to the issue of child marriages for youth. And as you all may be familiar, that the 64% of the population of Pakistan consists of youth. So it covers the largest amount of total population. Unconscious gender bias can be handled by providing the culture neutral educational training to youth in educational institutes, and the importance of education on female gender can be highlighted to diminish the stereotypical misconception among girls living in rural region, especially belonging to the lower socioeconomic status. The limitations and suggestions for the present study are: the data for the present study was collected in a short time period, as it was the requirement of academic. So the questionnaire-based research method was used in the present study. So future studies can highlight mixed qualitative research method, which I am doing in my PhD research as well. I'm using a mixed method approach, and I'm trying to highlight the marital quality of these women. So another limitation was that the study comprising the present issue should be designed for the sample of rural population who are most commonly facing this issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anila Aziz, for this presentation. Any questions from the participants?
So this is Adnan. So basically, if you can go over the results in a little bit more detail, and also explain a little bit about what, have you looked at the same thing for men? So early marriages seem to be a social construct, and one hypothesis would be that in the households, in the communities that marriages are happening early, it's the same would apply to men and women. And particularly if you're going to make the case for gender discrimination, it would be useful to actually say within the same community, men were not subject or subject less to those restrictions. So it would be actually interesting to look at that. So it wasn't. I wasn't completely clear if that came through well enough, or your results suggested any of that.
Anila, would you like to comment on that?
Yes, sir. You're right. You're very right that these marriages are also impacting the male members and who are also under 18. But in most cases, it has been seen in the literature. The literature guides us that these are mostly harmful for females from the physical health perspective. So the other concerns are missed out in most of the studies, although they have economic pressure among males that they should be early earners of the family, and the responsibilities they are going to handle in the future should be handed over to them in the early age. But the most concern of the society is the health of the female child, because they are mostly facing the health issues like HIV and AIDS, and neonatal health is not very well explained to these girls, and their well-being is mostly being affected on this scenario. So the most focused area on girl child marriages is due to the concern that they are mostly being affected, and their ratio is more common than male child. So however, my senior is conducting a research on male participants as well, and she is saying that males are not very well known for the child marriages as compared to females, and some dowry issues and poverty issues are very common among these girls in this population. So, however, I added up to this.
Thank you, Anila. And I have a little question as well from you. Where do you see we need to intervene more? Do we need to establish a strict legal structure and spread legal awareness regarding that child marriages are a crime and it's a punishable crime? Or do we need to work on the sensitization side in terms of our norms and culture? As you have mentioned in your presentation as well, that the culture and norms are basically one of the key supporters of child marriages. So in terms of priority agenda, where we need to intervene with a strong hand, do we need to intervene on the cultural side, or do we need a stronger legal structure to control child marriages?
You are very right. So the basic concern is to end or to minimize the child marriages cases. So from the legal perspective, I think that is a strong point with which we can end this. So we need to legalize, or we need to implement our laws very strongly so that we can control it. But on the other side, cultural practices and norms are very strong, that they are preventing us to apply the law in those areas where these are common. As you can see on the KPK side or in the Sindh, you can see these practices very common. However, in urban areas as well, where laws are very established, but instead of that, these practices are happening. So law alone is not enough to implement strongly. However, we need to raise awareness among these people that what are the health consequences of these marriage practices and how they can be resolved, providing education and awareness and providing the career opportunities to these girls. As I have seen in some literature that they have provided funding, some international funding organizations have providing the funding to those families where child marriages are a problem, but instead of that, they are not taking it as it is needed. I mean to say that they are preventing it. How? They are saying that these are our cultural practices, these are our norms, and we cannot raise a girl child on these fundings. We need to get rid of these responsibilities that is handed over to us by our culture. So I think from both sides, we need to make ourselves strengthen. We need to provide awareness to these parents as well. We need to provide awareness to these societies, and they need to implement law very strongly on the other side. Thank you.
But aren't you dealing with cultural factors as well? I mean, are a lot of the child marriages or aren't they maybe from the lower socioeconomic segment of society? And therefore you have to deal with some of those cultural issues as well, that, because it may be an economic factor that they look at, we need to marry off our younger daughters because we don't have the economic, or maybe there's an economic incentive that they gain by going through that marriage process.
Yes, sir. That is how it is. They are actually getting bride price for marrying of their child to upbring the other children in their family. So that is why, from the economic perspective, these practices are very common in those cultures. So I think so. If the awareness makes it happen, okay, that you can deal with this child marriages problem, that you can provide them awareness or provide the positive aspects of getting educated or earning their own money to raise their future generation. So I think so that providing them education for free of cost or raising the awareness among this population can enhance their socioeconomic status as well. That's what I think.
And if there were, if the economy was different, then would the family then need, or not, maybe not need to marry off their younger daughters because the economic situation would not necessitate that?
Yes, sir. Yes, you are right. But however, there are some policies that can be introduced in those societies from the government, or government need to restructuralize this marital institute. These practices need to be re-evaluated. What are the real reasons behind them? Maybe there are some other reasons, or maybe the community practices are also forcing these parents to marry off their child. However, they have good socioeconomic backgrounds, but so in some of the middle socioeconomic statuses, they are also practicing this.
Thank you, Anila. Here, I would like to add something based on my own observations, as I've been working more than 2 decades with on different gender-based health issues and gender discrimination. To me, it's more of a cultural thing, because I have come across with so many child marriage cases where economy wasn't that big issue. The cultural practices, the family norms of getting married earlier, getting settled earlier, the social pressure, the family pressure, and your clan's pressure that, okay, your girls and boys, they should get married early. So based on my own observations working with socially secluded communities as well as different rural and urban communities on the Punjab side of Pakistan, this is what I have observed, that culture is the decisive factor. Your norms, your practices, your family pressure, and the centuries old tradition of every family, that, okay, this is the certain age every family or every community holds for a boy and a girl to get married and get settled. And I would like to point out here that we desperately on war footings need to conduct researches on the psychological and the traumatic side of a boy's child marriage, because we are somehow prioritizing so far child marriage from a female or a girl's point of view. It's equally traumatic for a boy to get married in an early age as well. This is what I have come across, this is what I have observed, and this is what I seriously feel, that this is the corner which is empty. It needs our attention as social workers, as academicians, as researchers, that we need to highlight that child marriage is equally traumatic for a boy, for a girl. Basically, child is a child, and we should not be focusing our research exclusively towards girls' side. Thank you very much, Anila. Thank you very much.
Ma'am, I want to comment on that. Yes, you are right. There is a term that is used in the literature, that is child marriage trauma. So when we apply that term, it is for both sides, no? From male perspective and from female perspective. So there should be intervening factors, or there should be some interventions that can be used for dealing with child marriage trauma. And yes, you're right in other comments that we need to focus on the other health, well-being, or psychological well-being perspective, as it is seen in the literature that these females also experience the post-traumatic stress or the postpartum psychosis as well. So from that perspective, we also need to focus on psychological well-being of these females or male. Obviously, they have more economic pressure in this marriage, or other social pressures they are also facing. But however, we need to deal with this situation from the psychological perspective and from the physical perspective as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anila. Here we will invite our next presenter. Her name is Dr. Amna Zanera Binte Abdul Razak. She is going to share her research on usability of gifted psychoeducational module among gifted and talented students, a psychometric assessment using USC instrument. Over to you, Dr. Amna. Yes, your screen is visible and it's being shared. Dr. Amna, I think your mic is mute. I can't hear you. You have to unmute your mic because I can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, now I can hear you. Yes, please.
Can you see my slide?
Yes, they are visible. Please start your presentation.
Okay. Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Okay, my name is Dr. Amna Zanaria Abdul Razak. So I will present my research is about the usability of gifted psychoeducational module among gifted and talented Muslim students, psychometric assessment using use instrument. Okay. So for the introduction and the background, the social emotional aspect is a vital skill requirement that needs to be acquired. Herbert and Smith 2018 claimed that social emotional aspects are vital for students because they will feel safe and comfortable by having a stable social emotional level, seeking knowledge cheerfully and facing conflict in their daily lives. And he symbolized the cognitive and social-emotional analogy of this gifted and talented student like two sides of the same coins. Okay, this study, so Jan 2017, maintained that the gifted and talented student intervention is needed. Okay, one must do further research that contribute to gifted and talented students' domain and explain intervention methods in detail to contribute knowledge for further researchers. According to the research of module development and evaluate its usability among gifted and talented students is essential. So this is my module. Okay, gifted module. So actually this is in Malay. So now we are going to translate this module to English translate. Okay, so the usability module study was conceptually implemented before this module development study completed. Actually, this is the research for my PhD. Okay, so this is the innovation for my PhD research. So I also do the usability module test for the third phase in the DDR level. Okay, so according to Rubin and Chesnell 2008, usability studies are administered to assess the quality of the product. And then the usability test also usually implementation to evaluate whether the objective of the overall module development can be achieved or not. So module improvement will be made after collecting the feedback from the module user. So after I got the data for this usability studies, so I improve my module to make the final module for gifted psycho-educational module for Muslim gifted and talented student. So usability study essential to assess and evaluate the quality of the product. And the usability testing method for this study, I use the use questionnaire by LAN 2001, which is known for its use to measure the product usability. Okay, so the rationale of my study, the socio-emotional issues among gifted and talented students are growing daily. Based on the need analysis performed, I have performed the need analysis study, and the finding that I have is the most common socio-emotional issues. There's a lot social emotional issues among the student. But the highest socio-emotional issues are perfectionism, social anxiety, and OE, or overexcitability. Therefore, my module development study was attend on these three issues only. This is the limitation of the study also. The innovation product of this module was named Gifted Psycho-Educational Module. So the theoretical framework, so from the theoretical perspective, the theoretical framework for the development of my module is based on three theories. For perfectionism, I choose the multidimensional personality theory. For the social anxiety, I use cognitive and behavior models. And for the OE, I use the positive disintegration theory from Dabrowski 1964. So for developmental of gifted and psycho-educational module, I use DDR, okay, which is I use ADI model, which contains analyze, design, develop, implement, and evaluate. So this is the process that I've gone through. Okay, so this is the framework. So for my module, I got three sub-module, which is the two theory and one model. And after that, that's got a unit that, which is the unit is the sub-construct of the theory. And from there, I develop the activities. So you can see there is 20 activities for my module. Okay. So for the research question, basically my study is to, I want to know the level of usability of this module from three dimension, which is usefulness, satisfaction, and ease of use. So for the methodology, for the module evaluation phase, the use questionnaire was used in this research, which contained 30 items representing the three dimensions, which I mentioned above. Okay, and then a sum of 30 users in gifted and talented student was a sample. and they underwent the gifted psychoeducational module. Okay, I run the intervention for them about 10 weeks. Okay, and then the Combatch Alpha for the reliability rating for this instrument for LAN 2001 instrument was very good, and then the use instrument was relevant for measuring module usability among the user. Okay, so this is the result of the finding of my research. Okay, the finding of usability analysis, you can see here the usefulness, satisfaction, and ease of use. It is usability value is medium high. Okay, then and the empirical evidence of level of validation and reliability of the module used to test the product usability through the elements of usefulness, satisfaction, and ease of use of gifted psychoeducational module. This study successfully replicated preceding studies that's run before. Okay, and then the use instrument is suitable for usability studies as the study uses the same instrument as the studies conducted by several previous researchers before. Okay, for the implication and limitation, okay, this gifted psychoeducational module has confirmed to help the socio-emotional issues among gifted and talented students. Okay, and this research was attempted to test the usability of the module. For the conclusion, okay, based on the gifted and psychoeducational psychology module developed, this usability study was implemented. It's confirmed that the module is suitable to be used as a module to help socio-emotional issues for perfectionism, social anxiety, and OE among gifted and talented students. Okay, I think that's all for my presentation today. I'm Dr. Amna, lecturer in Genius Insan College, University Science Islam Malaysia. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amna, for sharing this very, very interesting and very full of so many information sets for our social workers and for us who are exploring this field of health.
Yeah.
As due to some unavoidable circumstances, one of our presenter who was going to present her study on self-help approach to treat depression, she's unable to present. So I will invite our session chair, Dr. Adnan Khan. Dr. Adnan Khan is a very well-known researcher in the field of public health. He has devoted basically all of his life towards the cause of public health. He has leaded quite a few very interesting and impactful researches on family planning and urban programs. He has worked in collaboration with countless international organizations in terms of gender-based health issues and from different dimensions. He holds a vast experience working with international organizations such as FCDO, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, UNICEF, Johns Hopkins University. Over to you, Dr. Adnan, for your valuable comments.
So just to be clear, is this it? Are there more presentations coming?
There were 2 presentations were supposed to be, but one of our presenters is having some connectivity issues, and the other presenter, she is unable to present today due to personal issues. So,
all right.
So far it's end for today's presentations.
Okay, so thank you so much. I mean, that was actually a very kind introduction. But it has been a very, very interesting session today, this morning, starting with Dr. Bruce Friedman's elaboration of the framework to understand this. I think that's always been very. I think it's important to set the stage for how do you understand concepts such as these. And I agree with you that Dr. Friedman's session, think about that, was 2 years ago, was very, very educational and useful. Building on that, I mean, just to let's take a step back and say where we're coming from. I mean, the very fact that we're dealing with a social well-being construct. I mean, what are we talking about? Historically, we've all come out of communal living. Individuality is a recent concept historically. It's only 200, maybe 300 years at most in the West, probably less so in many of our developing country contexts, and particularly in Pakistan. So what are we really dealing with? We're really dealing with how social constructs interact with individuals, and individuals thrive in social contexts. And I think some of the speakers actually delved into some of this. In particular, the talk by Ms. Anila Aziz on child marriages. I mean, child marriages came out of, as Dr. Friedman also pointed out, came out of a necessity of some sort over centuries. Now that is changing, and that has to deal with that change has to do with how individuals and their social context is changing. Societies that required or had the prevalence of early child marriages had a different context. Now, we see that as in terms of poverty, but also some social norms of how individuals are seen, their role in that society is being seen. So are they just a producer of children? Is there some level of what is the role of a young unmarried person, male or female, in a society? Is there a role of a young unmarried person? Is there social disruption because of presence of very large number of such individuals in a society, versus these individuals have a role that can propel changes of different kind? And remember that in a society that has very defined roles, there is disruptiveness, and I say that with a negative sense, disruptiveness of change that can come. So those kind of things have to be. So if you have very many young people that do not fit a societal social construct, then that's a disruptive presence, and societies don't like to deal with it, as opposed to a society that has very many people who are in and out of the larger predefined social construct. And in those cases, and which is how increasingly modern societies are, that we are all collections of individuals that occasionally socially interact. And so these constructs play across each other, and that's kind of where in the use of intersectionality by Dr. Azhar Hamid Qamar comes in. These are different lenses that we are looking at our society, individuals versus social constructs, who fits in, who doesn't, when do you fit in? It's not just, are you going to fit in all the time in this versus that social construct? I mean, we're moving through different spheres socially, and therefore any understanding has to account for those differences of individuality, of socialness, of which particular kinds of social constructs are we talking about, and those are changing. I think as researchers, we need to understand how that changed from completely social constructs of 200 years ago have changed to today. And then within our societies, rural versus urban versus more affluent internationally connected individuals versus not so internationalized individuals. Those are all important constructs because these social pressures are changing things, and they're causing stresses, but they're also giving opportunities. And it would be interesting to see research starting to address these things. Research is starting to address, but it's also we need to, as researchers, need to be aware that changes require understanding, and understanding has to be rooted in where we're coming from and who, what we are expecting. I hope I'm not very cryptic in saying all of this, but I think that's what this is. I mean, the nexus of individuals in their social systems is actually very, very diverse, and that diversity is both a strength and a weakness, and that we researchers need to address that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adnan, for this very, very, very interesting sum up of and a very, very, very thought-provoking sum up of all the presentations that were shared today. And yes, definitely we need to explore more. We need to work more. Well-being as a multidimensional and as an umbrella term, we need to explore it more. We need to think out of the box, and we need to be understanding more in these challenging times. Thank you very much, Dr. Bruce. Thank you very much, Dr. Adnan Khan. And thank you very much all of my presenters for today. And Dr. Bruce, any concluding remarks from your side?
Well, I was going to add to what Dr. Adnan said, because, and I'm blanking on the authors right now, but when I was the special editor for the British Journal of Social Work, there was a study that came out of Chile that was looking at comparison between the factors of aging, and looking at two different populations, one that was assimilated and the other that maintained their cultural values. And it was interesting because what they found was that the group that maintained their cultural values seemed to have less stress and were more, and were aged a lot more, effectively than the assimilated group. And so it really addresses, for me, when we were talking about the child marriages, the importance of culture and how important culture really does play on aspects of well-being and health. And I think that, there needs to probably be a little bit more, as opposed to looking at this assimilation and melting pot, but how we can really embrace those aspects of diversity. I mean, the big thing in the United States is really looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion. And how do we really begin to embrace and support the ability of embracing that equity, as opposed to what Glaser and Moynihan talked about was the melting pot, because the melting pot, the assimilation, is really detracts from a lot of those natural cultural health factors that individuals use in order to help with well-being and coping.
Great. One comment, if I may add on methodology. Dr. Anila, you actually used a fairly large sample, but you did convenient sampling. Please understand that all quantitative analyses that you describe have a basic assumption of random distribution of sample. So as an academic, you would want to publish, because that's really, publications are the currency of our trade. And when you send in a paper, more than likely, most reviewers would not process your convenience sample paper very much. So if you can, please spend some time on method, data collection. Convenience sampling is just not scientific sampling. You cannot do quantitative analysis on convenience sample. They're just not, the assumptions for analysis will just do not hold. So it's useful to actually consider, particularly when you're doing your PhD work and beyond, not to go with convenience sampling, but to think through your sampling methodology a bit more.
Yes, sir, you are very right. I'm using a grounded theory approach for qualitative analysis, and for as it was designed for mixed method approach. So in quantitative analysis, I will consider your suggestion. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adnan. Thank you very much, all of my presenters for today. And thank you very much, Dr. Bruce, for gracing this occasion. Thank you very much once again. And over here, we end this session with this hope and this commitment that all of us, all the presenters and all of us here at NUST, we will keep on working and striving for the betterment of the people around us and for all the people whom our research and our brain is committed to. Thank you very much, all of my presenters and all the joiners here. Thank you.
Thank you.
So it's time to leave, huh?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. And hopefully we'll meet very soon in NUST with another interesting session of learning from you.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you. So are you in a doctoral program? Oh, you are a doctor, right?
No, sir, I'm not a doctoral program. I'm a full-time teaching faculty at School of Social Sciences.
Yeah, but you're not interested in a doctoral program?
Hopefully, if you are going to supervise, then hopefully, why not?
Well, I mean, I'm more than happy to supervise. I mean, we have what we call an interdisciplinary doctorate in health sciences that we offer here, a PhD.
Definitely, I'll stay in touch with you and I'll email you, and we can talk about it, and we can come up with some way out. If you are going to supervise.
Well, I mean, right now I have, let me see. I have four students that I'm their mentor. So.
Then count me the fifth one.
What?
Count me the fifth one.
Well, I'm hoping that one of them is going to be finishing her dissertation probably in about a year.
Right.
So there's always room for more.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you for this act of generosity. Definitely, I'll email you and I'll discuss what is in my brain regarding this PhD research. I'll try to come up with some interesting proposal. Definitely, sir.
Well, I mean, there's always things to do. I know that when I left class tonight, one of the doctoral students is from, I think he's from Ghana. So, you know, and because University of Texas at El Paso is right on the border. So, I mean, I look out my office window and I see Juarez, Mexico. So it's, you know, so we did a lot of talking this evening about community, and just because there's this border between the two countries called the Rio Grande River, that does not mean that you have families who are living on both sides of the border. And, you know, things became a little bit difficult after September 11th, when the United States closed down the border. And I said at that point in time, because I told my students that I was going to be presenting. And I said, oh, it's like when I was in Pakistan before, and I learned a lot about partition and what was it, 1947 or 48, when the British government,
It was August 1947.
47, and how the British government,
Yes.
created this, boundary between, between India and Pakistan, but how it split families. You would have families who would be, no, don't put the border there, because I have my family on this side and half my family on the other side. And, and that's where you get into the politics, and how the politics really sometimes, detracts.
Yes.
So when Donald Trump was talking about building this wall between, and a lot of the environmentalists were saying, but wait a minute, you have wildlife that really cross the river. So you're going to, detract from the wildlife's ability to be able to migrate appropriately. It's sometimes the, governments get in the way. And you asked the question about, about the pandemic and COVID.
I
And,
did.
it's very complicated. And I think that personally, I think that given the information that I've learned recently about Anthony Fauci and his involvement with the pharmaceutical companies and some of the research, there's a conflict of interest. And he should have recused himself from actually being involved with a lot of the COVID stuff and the decisions, because he's potentially generating profit or income, and that's a conflict of interest. And we really need to look at the science and not look at what personal gain somebody is going to get, because this is what they're talking about. So it's to me, it's very messy.
It is. It's messy for everybody who has a sensitive heart and a thoughtful brain. It is messy how people are using these times for filling in their pockets. How people are like literally being so selfish and so self-centered. I mean, they are prioritizing their own monetary interests and trading off the humanity, the feelings for fellow human beings, which is lying within every human being, and they are just trading it off for their own monetary benefits, the little benefits.
Yeah, and then they're showing that this messenger RNA that they've put in the vaccines.
Yes.
So what they're putting in is little robots, little nanobots into the vaccine that they can begin to track us. So, I have this app that really, what's it called? Bluetooth scanner. And if you turn on Bluetooth scanner, then it will track people who have been vaccinated, because you will be able to see that there's this tracking mechanism in the vaccines because of the nanobots that they put in the messenger RNA. And it's almost like the book, George Orwell's book, 1984, where people were known where they were. And it's like, oh, we're messing with people's individual liberties by putting these nanobots in our bodies. And then there's the other question that comes up, which is, the vaccines were really pushed really quickly without really going through the full testing.
Yes.
And then you see all these individuals who are, getting heart arrhythmias, and they're having, problems because the vaccines are attacking some of the organs. And specifically, some of the genitals of individuals. So therefore it's affecting reproductive capabilities. I mean, it's like all these factors, and it's just crazy that, we're, the government is saying, oh, mandate get these vaccines, and and without having all the details, and it's creating a second, sort of a dual class citizenship of those who are vaccinated and those who aren't, without really getting the full evidence of what's been happening.
And what is ultimately going to happen with those vaccinated people? That ethical debate was never actually generated, was never actually given any consideration. And it was, to me, as a human being, it was a very hasty decision of going for vaccination. Okay, it was a life-saving situation, but we should have prioritized some ethical consideration. And that the missing link is that ethical debate that was never generated, and the one that was generated, it was never given any kind of very serious consideration.
So
yes.
Can I ask a personal question?
Please, yes, please.
Can I ask you a personal question?
Please, yes, you can.
Were you vaccinated?
Yes, I am. I am vaccinated. Yes, even the booster. 3 times. Shot 1, shot 2, shot 3.
Okay.
Times. Yes, I am.
Yeah, same with me. I got 3 booster, three dose, and the third one is the booster. So now Malaysia is open for the children, for our children to take the vaccine now. So I have to think first before my children take the vaccine.
How old are your children?
I got 7 children. I just finished my PhD. The oldest is 24, and the youngest is 6 years old.
Well, the 24-year-old is old enough to make his or her own decision.
Yeah. So the first one and the second one has took their vaccine, because now they are studying in UK. So the others not vaccinated yet.
But as a mother, as a parent, it is a very difficult decision for taking your children, I mean, under 18 children, and deciding on their behalf. It's one of the difficult decisions.
So it's interesting because Robert Malone, Dr. Malone, is, I think, the founder of the messenger RNA technology. And he talks about how he's been vaccinated, but knowing what he knows now is he probably wouldn't do it. And then you see that there are a number of people like McCullough, Dr. McCullough, and they're saying that it's probably the worst thing, for some of these young children to be vaccinated, because it fights off their ability to develop their own immunities. So I got vaccinated. I only had 2. I'm not going to get the booster because all the evidence that I've been reading is that the vaccine and the boosters are only good for the alpha and beta strains of COVID. And what we're dealing with right now are the Delta and Omicron strains. And they've basically, developed, that they are immune to the vaccine. So then why do I want to get a booster for something that's, and eventually, and hopefully I will build up my own immunities, so that I can fight it off. And the other thing is that I'm reading is that there are basic vitamins. So if you take vitamin C and zinc and and vitamin D. So therefore I can increase my own immunities by just increasing my vitamin intake. And that to me is a lot healthier than putting some chemical into my system. I mean, I'm a firm believer of more of a holistic approach to things. And, you know,
Okay. Okay. Perfect.
so I don't know. I'm not trying to tell you, you have to make your decision yourself. But, you know, I would probably say, you know, look at some of the research
Yes.
and look at some of the natural immunities that, you know, might mean that increase your vitamin C and vitamin D and vitamin and zinc.
Zinc. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Yes, I am taking care of multivitamins and I mean good sleep, a healthy lifestyle more than ever. I mean, since COVID, the one thing that has changed and which I have observed in my communities as well, that more and more people are going towards adopting a healthy lifestyle. And this is a positive sign and a positive contribution of this pandemic towards an individual's life, that people are more than ever now they are aware of going for a healthy lifestyle, protecting themselves in terms of personal health, maintaining social distancing and personal hygiene. People are more aware and more conscious and cautious more than ever now. So it's a positive contribution. At least I feel like this thing.
All right. So this was supposed to be a 3-hour session.
It was supposed to be, but because of two of our presenters were unable to present, so we are concluding in about 2 hours. So
Yeah, that's what I'm
end
looking
of our
at.
session. Yes, it's a end of our session. And from me, good day to all of my presenters. And for you, as you are on other side of the planet Earth, so for you, it's I assume it's not a good day, it's a good night.
Well, yes, it is a good night. And I'm seeing your next session is at 1400 hours. So
Yes,
so-
it's 1400 hours. Yeah, it is.
So now you have a 2-hour break.
Yes, we have a 2-hour break for lunch break, prayer break. It's a 2-hour break.
Yeah, it says lunch and prayers.
Yes, sir. Yes.
So this is what your afternoon prayers?
It's our midday prayers. Midday prayers. One is a morning prayer, and this one is going to be our midday prayer.
Because you have 5 prayer times.
Yes, I do. It's 5 times a day. It's an honest answer. Yes, I do. 5 times a day. I do.
I only do 3 times a day.
In our case, it's because it's 5 times a day. So I tried.
No, I understand. Okay, well, I hope I ran through it pretty quickly. I hope I addressed what you were looking for.
It was. It's always a new version of intellectual wealth that you always offer, and it's always new fields to explore, new points to think in terms of community work, in terms of interaction with secluded communities, as it is in my case. It's always a wealth of knowledge. It's always there.
And what communities are you working with right now?
I am working right now with rural, socially secluded rural communities of rural side of Punjab. It's the marginalized people in terms of their, and I am nowadays working in terms of legal awareness regarding harassment, regarding gender-based discrimination, regarding gender-based inequalities. I am working in those. Excuse me. I am working in those areas. Basically, my motto is there that law should be accessible, but accessible law, before making laws accessible, you need to make laws understandable. And for making laws understandable, you need to make them easy for a common man. This is what I'm working for nowadays.
Well, sounds interesting. I mean, I know that the power analysis and we spend a lot of time in class doing that power analysis, the power mapping. And, you know, one of the issues that people said is, you know, if we're looking at, you know, like in November, there was a shooting where a 13-year-old brought a gun to school and shot 4 or 5 of his classmates. And it's coming out now. I saw that the mother sent a text message to her son saying, "Oh, did you show your teacher your new gun?"
Oh my God.
And so, this is one of the issues. Are the parents responsible or complicit in their child, shooting? And my feeling is, I'm not a gun person. I don't believe in guns. But my feeling was that the parents here are now promoting it, and then here's a child who brings a gun to school and kills some of his classmates. What was he, 8th grade or something like that? And, so we're talking about, if we're going to create a policy in the schools, who's making that policy decision? So the school board is making the policy decision, but how powerful are they? If you go to that power map that I showed,
Yes.
how powerful are they? Are there other people who are influencing them in those decisions? And who, if you're going to look at creating a change, do you go to the politicians, or do you go to the people who are influencing the politicians in those decisions?
But in terms of my experience working with these indigenous communities, the thing that matters at the end of the day is what you are being taught by your immediate surrounding. And in your immediate surrounding, your parents, your siblings, your peers, they are the decisive actors. So for this and for issues like this, we need to work for a change at a very micro level. And for that change, we need to hammer that message again and again of respect, sensitivity, and understanding how precious next person's life, privacy is. So basically my motto, and the people who are working with me on these initiatives, our motto is we should be spreading the message of responsibilities as civic citizens, not the message of rights. Because if you are fulfilling all of your responsibilities, there will be no issue of rights. So the whole issue is going around it.
And I know, and it's interesting that I see is to really find who the power people are within a community, because they're the influencers.
Yes.
So I know that when I was in now this is a number of years ago, but when I was in Beijing and we went to, one of the communities, that housing projects, and you had some of the elders of the community who were sitting, in the entranceway. And as people had conflicts, they would come to the elders for a decision. So what that began to tell me was that it's the elders of the community who influence the other pieces of the community. And that's part of their culture. So if you wanted to create some sort of a change, you have to find those individuals who have the actual power to really influence others. Otherwise, what I hear you saying is you're doing each one at a time rather than trying to go to the larger context of who are the decision makers who are going to influence the others. And if you don't influence them, you can do all you can, but then when they have a conflict, they're going to come to the elders, and the elders are going to say, no, that's not what you have to do. And so therefore, you have to start with the power people to influence everybody else.
Yes, we are taking all the influencers, all the key decision makers who are in those communities. But definitely, I'll considering your suggestion and honoring your suggestion, I'll be focusing more on them, because at the end of the day, their voice, their suggestion, and how they steer the situation matters.
That's right. And they're going to influence the others because because the others have their respect, and therefore they're going to ask their opinion. So if you can influence them, then it'll save energy on your part. So one of the things I was thinking in developing this, I said, well, do we talk about elevator speeches?
We did.
Yeah.
We did last time in our course as well. We did with you. I had it. Yes.
Yeah, I know, but I was thinking, do I introduce elevator speech here?
No.
And I said, no, in a half hour, I don't have time to talk about it.
But during your course, you did. We spent more than half of the session of one day discussing the concept of elevator speeches and how effective they are in terms of community behavior modification, how
right.
powerful tool they are. Yes, we did.
And that's an important tool, but it's part of that way of helping to get people, helping them with that influencing to get them on. And the power map is a good way to really begin to think about how do you use those tools
Yes.
in a logic, in a logic model. I mean, it's funny. I had a whole piece on elevator speeches on page 22 of this book.
Is your book available online to be purchased?
Yeah, probably it's available through Cogmella.
Okay. Okay.
So I can send you the web page.
Thank you.
Just email me.
Okay, I will email you and I'll stay in touch with you regarding my PhD.
Okay. And would NUST pay for it?
I'll see. Because so far I haven't got the idea, but I'll see. And I'll see what opportunities of funding there are available for me. I'll see.
And who's now in charge since Salma stepped down, Dr. Siddiqui?
Dr. Salma is now Dean of School of Social Sciences, and one of my seniors, Dr. Gulnaz, she is the head of Department of Behavior Sciences now. Dr. Salma is now Dean of School of Social Sciences.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she is. So I'll talk to Dr. Salma, that we should invite you for our further learning.
Well, I tried to send her a private chat, but she didn't respond.
Because at the moment she is simultaneously involved in 3 different sessions. So
I know, I saw her here and I tried to send her a private chat, but she didn't respond.
Okay, I'll remind her. I will.
All right. Well, you have a good one. And I guess I will say, have a good lunch.
Thank you.
And I'm going to try to get some sleep.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Bruce. It's always a feast talking to you. It's always an intellectual feast. I adore every word. Thank you very much.
Okay. Have a good day. Have a good rest of the conference.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Bruce. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye.